Hello, Emma. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Leanne. So good to be here with you today.
Thank you. I'm thrilled you're here. We're talking about something that's really dear to my heart, which is midlife burnout.
Mhm.
So many of us are suffering from it or have suffered from it, and it feels bad, right? It's just a really uncomfortable place to be, especially for women who are also going through bigger changes. And to feel the way we might in a career we've worked so hard to build
Mhm.
can feel disempowering, honestly. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast to talk about how we might reach this crossroads in our career where we've poured so much into it and we have the titles, we have the network, we have the success, but we need a change. So that's what you do. You coach women through how to pivot and build on their career instead of hit burnout and collapse, which is what happened to me. So I
Yes,
could have really used someone like you.
yes, yes, yes. I
Um,
hear this often, Leanne.
I bet you do. I'm wondering if you could start out by talking about what are signs of burnout that you see. What we might
Yeah.
feel it, but what are they?
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's really interesting, right? Because we're at an interesting, when we talk about midlife, we're at an interesting point actually, because, we are generally Gen Xers and we are the first generation who's been told that we can have it all. We can have the family, we can have the career, we can have the success, we can have the happiness and all the joy, that all the women before us, have paved the way for. But we get to this point in our midlife where we say, I don't know that I actually want that. And I don't know if it's been worth it. And so, what I see in my clients is this real sense of why is this so hard? I don't like how I'm feeling, and I don't like where I'm going. And I don't want to spend the next half of my life feeling the way that I currently feel right now. And so we're tired, we're exhausted because we have, raised the family, we have built our career, we have made sacrifices, and, we've missed moments that matter in order to do that. And so we just get to this point where we're almost saying, is that it? Like, is this it? Is this what I've worked so hard for? And why do I feel so empty? And why do I feel so lost? And why do I just feel like I don't even know if it was worth it in the end?
Yeah.
And so that's what I generally see with my clients. Very much a lack of joy, a lack of sense of peace, and just a lack of sense of direction in terms of what comes next. So yeah, that's what I see.
Oh,
Does that
yeah.
sound familiar? Is that where you really am?
It sounds very familiar, and it
Yeah.
also is a theme in most of the conversations I have with friends and my own clients as an energy healer. This
Yeah.
sense that, this sense of lost and what was it
Hmm.
all for? So my
Yeah.
question is it fair to say it's not if this happens to us, but when?
Oh, I think so. I think so. And look, I know from my own experience. So I worked in the public sector. So I worked in government. And, like most women, I did all the things, all the right things. I went to university. I had a family. I grew my career and I grew my career to the senior executive levels in government. And then, I dealt with difficult and complex situations. I was a great problem solver. I mean, you can't get promoted, right, and grow a career if you're not competent and capable and, able to work in your field of expertise. And so I followed the traditional career trajectory that probably many of your listeners, have followed or are following. And then I got to the age, it was 47 for me, where I was at the age I had done great work, and I just had a situation that just triggered me to a point that I found myself in a position that I couldn't resolve an issue that I found myself in. And I didn't know it at the time. But in hindsight, I didn't actually even know this was a thing. But in hindsight, I recognize now that I was actually in perimenopause. And so, of course, this is where all of our hormones are changing. And there is so much more to perimenopause than just our hormones. And so I feel like perimenopause is like a calling to women, especially these midlife women, us wise women who have experience and expertise behind us, to do leadership in a very different way to what we've done before. And so we have spent our whole careers contorting ourselves, trying to fit into a mold of leadership that doesn't actually match our makeup. It doesn't match the way we ebb and flow through life. It doesn't match, the fact that we are cyclical, that we are so connected and grounded, to Mother Earth, and that we follow, her ebbs and flows. We've been put into this model of leadership that's very linear. And, it's interesting, and you probably know this as an energy worker, Leanne, that, women, as we know, we have a hormonal cycle of around about, on average, 28 days or thereabouts, whereas men's hormonal cycle is 24 hours. And so, as they turn up in the same way, day in and day out, but we don't, sometimes we do things differently or we respond differently. They get confused as to why we can't turn up in the same way, each day. And we put pressure on ourselves to do the same rather than kind of living in that sense of flow that is actually our natural blueprint to our own success. And so we've suppressed everything it means to be a woman in order to be competitive, in this masculine construct of leadership. Now, that's not to say that there's anything wrong with men or a masculine construct of leadership. It's just to say that it doesn't work for us as women. And the reason that I believe that midlife women are being called to a different way of leading and being in their organizations is because it's us that's going to bring balance back into the world. We're at a point now where I say we've got enough experience and expertise and wisdom and maturity behind us to really be the voice of balance in the boardrooms, at the
Yeah.
corporate table for the decisions that are being made that affect all of us in some way, shape, or form. So,
Beautiful.
so yes, I do think absolutely that this is a point in time and a point in time in women's lives where we feel the call, which is, that our dissatisfaction is our call to do things differently.
Yes, I love that. It really is an invitation. I like to call
Yes.
it, instead of a midlife crisis, it can be a midlife transformation or a midlife awakening because we are so wise. And I love that you brought up um, our natural cycle versus a man's natural cycle. Somebody described it to me as they are the sun, up every day, constant, and reliably the same every day, moving through the seasons, and we're the moon, ergo the
Yeah.
moon cycle that we have. And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense that we are on a longer trajectory of that wave. And what I love about this is that there's a lot of talk right now about how it's the future of women. And
Yeah.
I actually think it is yes and, because if it's just the future is women, then we're once again going to be out of balance at some point. And we
Yes. Yeah.
really need both. It's okay to have the 24-hour cycle. It's also okay to have the 28 or 30-day or moon cycle. And
Yes.
they can work together so beautifully. That might be a whole nother episode about that. But all of what you're saying is ringing so true about how we're wired differently. So I'm curious, when we get to this crossroads, it can feel like we're trapped in our own success because we know so much, and pivoting away
Hmm.
from to do something completely different can feel like not good because we're essentially, it feels like we're leaving behind everything we've built. So I'm wondering if
Yes.
you could talk about how we are actually taking everything that we have learned and all of our expertise with us into this next phase of reinvention as opposed to abandoning
Yeah.
it.
Yes, 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 because I do not want women to abandon their post. Like I say, we are at these senior levels because we have the experience and the expertise. We are primed to do things differently and to lead the way. So I love to describe it as, the women before us kind of opened the door And we're in the room now, so we get to change the furniture. You know, we can open the curtains and move things around a bit. And so that's kind of what our generation, the job of our generation is to do. Of course, to make it easier and better, you know, for the one behind us who'll have their own job to do. And so, you know, like you, I see perimenopause as an invitation. So I like to use the seasons. I actually use the seasons in my work as a metaphor for women. And so, you know, perimenopause is one of those, is a season, like is our autumn years, our wise and wild woman. And of course, you know, deeply connected to the premenstrual stage as well. And so, you know, this is why we're raging, you know, we're angry and we're frustrated because there is so much we need to offload. And so, you know, so why, yes, we do suffer. There's absolutely no doubt that women suffer the physical symptoms of, you know, lack of sleep and hot flushes and all the things. It is a major transition in our life. Some people, I've heard it refer to it as reverse like teenagerhood, which I think sends a shiver up all our spines because I don't think any of us want to go back to being a teenager because
No.
they were hard years, right?
Yeah.
And so perimenopause can be hard years. But when we reframe it from being a curse, which is really what menopause has been sold to us, that, you know, our life is over, you know, when we hit menopause, we're no longer useful. And that, you know, that all of the stigma around being an older woman, when we can, you know, transcend that and transverse that and understand that in actual fact, this is our transition to our next phase of our lives, where we move from that nurturer, you know, carer side, which is a very important role that we play and we do so beautifully, into a leader teacher phase. And so, what perimenopause does is very, very powerful. It brings all of our, as does premenstrual, you know, our premenstrual cycle, brings all of our fears, our disappointments, our regrets to the surface. And the invitation is to work through those. So, the invitation is to be able to let go of those past beliefs, you know, the stories that we've been told, the stories that we tell ourselves, so that we can transform and transcend into this new phase of, you know, leader, and teacher. And when we do that, we just bring a whole new energy to ourselves and obviously to those around us, including those at work. And so it's a very, so even though these midlife, years, they feel difficult, they are such an opportunity for women to just go beyond, you know, what we know life to be right now.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because the female or the human species is one of only a very few number of species whose females live beyond their reproductive years. Most of them die when they're no longer reproductive. And there's an evolutionary reason for that. And it is because we are to step into this leader teacher role, that it is our job to guide, you know, not just our families, but our communities and, you know, broader into, you know, a new era, that we are here to pass on our wisdom, to continue to look after and look out for the generations behind us. And so, you know, to me, it's exciting, right? It's almost the most exciting time, you know, or another very exciting phase of life that women should really be looking forward to and feel very empowered to step into.
Yes. Beautiful.
Yes,
I love
yes,
this
yeah,
so
yeah,
much. I relate to the anger, frustration, disappointment. The grief
yes,
of this season is very real. And
yes,
I didn't understand that that is by design. When I was in the grief phase of perimenopause and menopause, I thought I was going to be there forever. I really
yes,
did think this was it. And I was going to be a disgruntled old lady forever. And I
yes,
have, you know, done a lot of work to push through that and to actually allow the grief, which made the process of the menopause and all of the midlife things that come with it much easier to navigate because I was
yeah,
accepting that that was one of the phases of transformation.
yes,
But there can be uh, a lot of fear, I think, in women during this time of being perceived as weak or
mm-hmm,
out of it, checked out of touch of reality, someone to be feared because she's unstable. And
yeah,
then we may be inviting in, we may be accepting inviting in that this is the phase that we're in, but paralyzed by the idea that we might be judged for it, seen differently at work for it, potentially refuse something that we've earned or want for it. How
Yeah.
do you help your clients navigate this really real fear of like, if I embrace this, if I embody this transformation, will it be the end of my career?
Yeah, I love that question. Excellent. And again, if we just think of some of those physical symptoms like brain fog, forgetting our words mid-sentence, we can lose a lot of confidence, in that and feel very judged by that as well. And so the work that I do with my clients is about understanding that leadership development is an inside job. We get to a point where we don't need any more strategies, we don't need any more tactics. We actually need to come inwards, and so it becomes an inward job. And so, like I say, I use the seasons as a metaphor, to help women work through that. And so the work that we do is about reprogramming what we believe to be true about ourselves. And so, for example, many women, feel they need to work really hard, that they're constantly on this treadmill to prove themselves, that they can do the job. And so they don't stop, they just keep on going. And they never ever feel like they can just kind of relax back. So they're constantly hustling to prove themselves. And so it's about understanding, why do we feel like that? Like, where does that belief come from? And what can we do to change and transform that so that we can be worthy for who we are, not what we do? So it's this change from this external focus to an internal focus. Do you know, another great example is we've spent our whole lives trying to fit in, right? We just want to fit in. We want to belong. We want people to accept us for who we are. But as a leader, we need to stand out, not fit in, right? We bring new ideas and fresh perspectives and, create innovative solutions when we step out of the mold of who we think we should be and step into the identity of who we actually are. And that's when we come up with the amazing, ideas and solutions and new ways of doing things and solving, old problems. And so this is the type of work that I do with women. And so I use a particular modality called heart healing. I use a number of modalities, but a key modality I use is called heart healing. And this is this real understanding that as women, we've learned to live in our heads, but all of our wisdom actually lies in our hearts and in our wombs and in our bodies. And so this is a move from get out of our head, let's get down into our hearts and really understand and heal, the relationships that we hold in our hearts that have us believing these things about ourselves that actually aren't true. And, we don't believe them because there's something wrong with us or because we're broken. We've been socialized into this. And so, this job that we have to do at this midlife point of our careers is almost like cleaning the slate, or clearing the slate, I should say. Let's get rid of all of that old stuff that we've been holding on to, and let's create space for something new and something different that is more empowering as we step into these, later stages of life. And so it's deep and it's transformational, but it's so effective, as you would have experienced yourself, Leanne. When we as women, when we change our energetic composition, the ripple effect is real. And the thing that I love about this work and what I love about in what I see in my clients is they don't have to do any, they don't have to do anything. This is what I try to explain to them. It's not about doing more. And in fact, it's often about doing less. And, as we know, the feminine energy is very much about being rather than doing. The masculine are the doing and we are the being. But we're talking energy here, not genders, of course. And so for women, it's really about just reclaiming who we are and understanding that we derive our power very differently to what we've seen exerted as power. And when we can step into that, watch out, world, I say. We are coming.
Yes,
And
yes,
we are
yes.
demanding change and demanding for things to be different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, there's so many beautiful things to unpack there. The aligning with the seasons was a really big one for me because it made so much sense, first of all. I now practice so much of what I shifted completely transformed how I experienced life. It transformed how I
Yeah,
experienced menopause. When I got into alignment with seasons and a more 28-day versus daily cycle, a lot of my menopausal symptoms minimized dramatically or went away altogether
yeah,
because I wasn't fighting against it anymore. I was accepting it.
yeah,
I was leaning into it as opposed to leaning out. I was accepting it as opposed to judging it. It shifted
yeah,
everything. And I realized, yes, the same thing you're talking about, so many things you're talking about, which is that women are built differently and by design. And a lot of it is reprogramming our own thinking and our own judgment about how we operate because we've been conditioned by a more male way of seeing things that we're supposed to operate a certain way. And we aren't. We just aren't. It's not how we do it. And so for me to get comfortable slowing down and taking longer was a big rewiring for me because I'm a doer. I'm a total type A entrepreneur. I was in the wedding industry, so it was all deadlines, all due yesterday, all
yeah,
every, go, go, go. And just when you think you got it lined up, it starts, something changes and you have to read, it's crazy.
yeah.
A lot of industries are like that. And women are expected to be on and
Hmm.
always on the ball, right in line with what is happening, pivoting when they need to pivot, and it does us a disservice. It
Hmm.
literally wears us out. And I actually thought that going through midlife and coming through the other side of menopause, I was going to be less vital, less excited, less in tune with the world. The exact opposite is true for me. I have never been more excited about the next phase, this
Yeah,
next chapter in my life. I didn't
yeah.
ever feel this way in my younger years. But
Mm,
because there's so much alignment happening with what I'm here to do, what my gifts are, and then there I've given myself this space to be
yeah,
able to cultivate those things. And
yeah.
it wasn't initially easy. I had a lot of resistance. People thought, like I said earlier, people thought I was crazy. I'd stepped off the wheel and they were like, well, she's gone off the deep end. And I was like, let him think that. Let's see what happens. Maybe I have gone off the deep end.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I know I can't do it the way I was doing it.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes,
and
yes,
but what I'm so encouraged by is this idea that we're not making big statements out to the world like I did by wholesale quitting my career. But this is internal work. It is always internal work. And so it
yes,
is a quieter work. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about that internal work. What does that mean? What I know you've
yes,
touched on it, but like for working with you, what is that
yes.
strategy of coming home to
Yeah, yeah,
yourself that
yeah.
way?
Yes, yes. So, like I say, so for many of my clients, it's about rewiring. It's about understanding those subconscious beliefs that make us do the things that we do and why we feel we have to do them. And it's always related to external, what other people might think of us. Like I say, this kind of proving of our worth, this trying to belong, in a world that we don't feel like we belong in. And these have been reinforced, for eternity through our social stories, our social narratives about what it is to be a woman and how we are lesser than, and particularly around how what makes us powerful has been devalued, and stigmatized to the point that we're almost like an empty vessel. There's kind of not much to us, and so we are just filled with all of this talk about how we should be and must be and have to be in order to be successful. And we really see this in the corporate world in particular, where we are just, women dressed up as men. We're not women as women. And so the work that I do with my clients is about, there are different phases to it. And so the first phase is about awareness. So once we actually understand and can see it, because we don't get taught any of this stuff. This is what always blows my mind. We don't get taught any of this. Like I said, I didn't even know perimenopause was a thing when I was, having my own, career meltdown. And so I didn't even know to look for it, or that was an option. So we don't get taught these things. And so awareness is always the first stage. And, I don't know about you, Leanne, but I'm sure, for many of your audience like me, I grew up thinking that, having our periods was sort of something shameful that we don't talk about, that we try and hide, that, that we just, it's not something that we kind of do or engage with, even though I now know that that is our blueprint for success, right? And so just all of that awareness around what it is to be a woman, what our bodies actually are and what they do, and reconnecting ourselves to it. Then there's a second part of my work, which is around what I call healing. So, and this is where we look at the relationship. So often what we find is that our core beliefs, obviously, they come from our very early childhood and the things that we had to learn in order to fit in. And so, for many of us, it's a process of evolution. It doesn't mean we come from bad families or have bad parents. It means that we are evolving. And so we learn things through our early years about what it means to fit in, what it means to belong, how we stay safe. And so to do that, we adopt the beliefs, of those who are closest to us. So obviously our primary caregivers. And then as we get a little older, it might be our teachers, our extended families, our community leaders. And then, of course, as we grow and we start to form our own identity, then we start to have some independent thinking around what we think about ourselves. But there's often a lot of residual stuff that's left over about even though we want to feel good and we want to be successful, there will be residual beliefs about, that success is bad or that there's something wrong with being successful, or the only way you can be successful is if you work hard, or what you deserve for what you have. And so what we do, and this is where the heart healing comes into it, is we actually do the healing. It's a beautiful meditative journeying process where we go into the subconscious and into the heart, and we heal the core relationships. So rather than therapy where you might have to go back and relive every event of your life, this is really about looking at those core relationships and healing those relationships. So, for example, if I saw you on the street and I came up to you and said, "Oh, Leanne, I don't like you, and you're a waste of space." You don't know me, and you just think that person, they're just a bit strange. I'll move on with my life. But if I was your mother saying those same words, it would have a very different response. And so it's really understanding the perspectives that we have based on the relationships that we have. And then what I often find with my work is with my clients, is that when I work with them, I can ask them questions and they can start to see there's actually a pattern of behavior. So either a pattern of behavioral cues or a pattern of relationships. So they fall into being the rescuer, for example, even at work, being the peacemaker, even at work. And so as we unravel these relationships kind of, at their primary source, then they're able to let go of the shackles. And then they do, we have what I call a remembrance. So as we release those and we make space for something new, it's not that we then learn something new, we actually start to remember. We remember what it means to be a woman. We start to tap into that wisdom that already lives within us, that there's nothing new to learn or to do or to be. It's a bit like, most people know Brene Brown, and she talks about the armor. It's removing the armor so we can finally see what has already been there and already exists. And that is where our power lies, is in what it is to remember to be a woman. Yes, not something outside of us.
I love
So that's
that.
the work I do with my clients. Yeah. And the
Yeah.
thing that I love about it so much is that, often when we talk about success and being successful, and I had this myself, right? When I left my corporate career, I had this strong sense I need to prove that it wasn't me. There was nothing wrong with me, that it was all of you, and that success should look like, a bigger pay packet, a better job, a higher profile, all of these things. And, my clients, come to me and they say things like, I'm not being, I'm the expert and I've been employed as the expert, in my agency, but no one's listening to what I'm saying, or no one values the work that's been done for me. And then, because we're looking for this outward validation that, yes, you're still important, you've still got a contribution to make. But what we find, and what I find with my clients, is that at the end of the day, we've got exactly what you described, this incredible sense of peace and joy. But actually, we don't need to do any of those things at all. And we don't need any of those things. And in fact, they are shackles, that they don't add anything to our life. And it's actually about taking all of the rubbish out and not bringing any of it back in again. And so, what my clients find, it's not, some of them, things change for them, but they change for them in very subtle and energetic ways. And so I love it when they tell me the stories about, so for example, I've got a recent client who was saying to me, who left and took a career break. She had some long leave, so she took some leave to really assess whether or not she wanted to stay where she was, or do something different, or retire. There was a lot of questions because she felt very unseen, very unheard, and she felt like she'd been dismissed as that kind of older woman. And she's been back at work, for a few months. And, last time when I spoke to her, she said, people like the organization is now building a team around me. I've now stepped into this more mentor role. And I said to her, it's not them, it's you. You're showing up differently. And so people are responding to you differently. Yes, and so she's getting so much joy, not from the seniors giving her accolades, but from the juniors coming and seeking her advice and counsel. And that's kind of what it's about.
Wow. So powerful. So
Yeah,
powerful. Well, there's so many things I'd love to comment on what you just said. Going back to the part about that, we're often like, we don't talk about menstruation in the teen years,
yeah,
and what it is to be a woman is minimized or hushed, or really has this big layer of shame around it. And that doesn't actually change as we get older. And menopause has an even worse reputation.
yes,
We are a feared species during those midlife years. And I think it's so interesting that it's often for the first time in a woman's life when she's at midlife that she's starting to understand this is all normal and natural for all of us.
yes,
This isn't her menstruation every month isn't an anomaly. It's how we're built. And as you say, it's our power. This rhythm is our power. These things that make us female are our power. It's our superpower.
yeah,
And I love that you're normalizing and empowering these things that make us female as opposed to treating it like it's something, like it's a handicap that we have to take into account as we try and be more like everyone else. And more like everyone else is never the way through.
no,
It's really debilitating, actually, when we're trying to be more like anyone else, whether they're
yes,
male or female. But I also love the way that it brings it back to the heart space, to the true
mm,
nature of women, to the true nature of how we operate, and that shift happens energetically, but it is felt. Some
yes,
phenomenal things have happened with my clients and with myself personally, where they make a shift internally. They don't even say anything. They don't even say
yeah,
anything. And suddenly
yeah,
their husband's talking to them differently, or their kids are
yeah,
treating them differently because they're seeing themselves as valuable. They're
yeah,
honoring their own worth of their time, their talents, their skills, what they're offering. And when we start to see ourselves having value, it will inevitably change how other people see us. It just will. And I was plagued with that, waiting for other people's validation. And then I would get it, and it was never enough. I was always like, well, they
yeah,
said it, but did they really mean it? And then I would overlay all this doubt and fear and all of this conditioning from my upbringing. And so it didn't even matter if I had the raise and the title and the team and the all the things, because if I wasn't understanding or valuing myself, nothing that was given to me could provide that. Nothing. And
no,
I was there. I was there with all of it. I
yeah,
had all of the network and all
yeah,
of the title and all the things.
yes,
What was
yes,
so
yeah,
interesting about phasing out of my career, which I know you don't encourage, you're really empowering women in their career to pivot while they're there and then keep building. But what I
yeah.
found
Oh, look, and
interesting, Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so I was just going to say, I'm all for women doing what works for them.
Mhm.
I'm just for women who want to stay in their career. But if they
Sure.
don't want to stay in their career, that's fine. There's lots of good people that they can work with who
Yeah.
will help them, and I'm all for it. I'm cheering them on from the sidelines.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm a burn it down and rebuild it kind of person. So I know like
Yeah,
wholesale walking away from careers is not for everybody. It is, if you know you are a person that can do it, then you know you're a person that can do it.
yes,
Otherwise, I really respect the work you're doing. I didn't want to stay in the wedding industry. I knew it was my time to go. I was very clear about that. I did not know what I
yeah,
was going to do next. And so I jumped before I knew, which is my story. But what was interesting about the jump was that I didn't want to burn bridges, but I definitely was letting go of the performative part of being a career woman because I wasn't investing in that company anymore and I wasn't investing in that role in the industry anymore. And so I share this because when I let go of the performative part of being someone and always rushing in to save people, always overcommitting, always,
yeah,
because I could do so many things and I could do it usually better and faster than anybody else. I thought that
yeah.
I should. I thought that I had to. Okay, so when I gave that up because I was like, well, I'm not going to be here anymore,
Yeah.
magic started to happen. It was the most unexpected thing that happened, I think, in the process of letting go, was
Hmm.
that I actually gained more respect,
Hmm.
I gained more clarity, more time. I stopped rushing in where I didn't belong.
Yeah.
And my work became more joyful even as I was letting it go. Not because I was letting it go, but because my relationship to the work had changed.
Yes,
And so
yes,
as
yes.
I'm leaving it, I'm like, wait, oh, that's what I should have been doing the whole time. But I took that wisdom with me into what I'm now doing. I took that
Yes.
with me because the other truth, and I'd love for you to speak on this, is if we don't
Yeah.
learn from how we are doing it in a way that's damaging to us, it doesn't really matter if we're pivoting careers or we're pivoting departments or we're pivoting roles. If we bring all of that stuff with us,
Yeah.
it's like leaving one marriage and getting married right away with to somebody else without doing the work in between. You're just going to recreate the
Yeah.
same scenario. Can you talk about that?
Yes, yes. And I love that. I love that you raised that because this goes back to what I was talking about when I can ask like my clients can be describing something to me as to why they might want to change or something. And then we can go back and we can see actually there is a pattern here. There's a pattern of behavior. There's a pattern of role playing, and a pattern of belief. And this is it, right? We take ourselves wherever we go. And so, getting a new job is not going to resolve the issue that you're finding if you're feeling overwhelmed, overworked, exhausted and tired.
Yeah.
And we have this tendency to externalize everything. And so it's not until we do that, inward looking, until we actually start to ask ourselves, who am I in all of this? What am I bringing to all of these situations? And do I want to do it or don't I want to do it? I had a client recently who, when she came to me, she was frustrated because she felt like everyone kept dumping on her, very senior in her organization, but she was the problem solver, if you like. And so, she never felt like she had the time or space to do any, good strategic work, or to build her team and her part of the organization because she was always being dumped on. And, as we were able to kind of unpick that, that need to be needed, and the dynamics around that, then everything started to change. And so, I remember her telling me that, she had been at a meeting where someone had, said that her team needed to fix this problem and she'd pushed back on it. And then, she said that ordinarily she would kind of go back and, ruminate on that, but instead she went and had a conversation with this person, which sounds logical and what we might think we might all ordinarily do. But until we recognize our patterns, we don't always see it. And so she was able to resolve that differently. And as a result, everyone now treats her differently. There's a sense about her that we don't dump on her anymore, but that we stop and we have a conversation, we get some advice, and she gives it back.
Wow.
So, there's subtle changes. Like I say, it's not about getting a big pay rise or a massive promotion. For some, it might be, But it really is just about this ability to be able to protect our own boundaries and to be able to understand what we value, what are our values, and how we work in alignment with those values, so that we can have this experience of feeling empowered and the peace, the natural peace that comes with us feeling like we are just fully aligned to who we are and to what we do. Yes, rather than
Oh,
being driven by that job title, which is, I
yeah,
was like you, Leanne, I was the same. I could outwork anyone, outperform anyone. That I felt that was I used to wear that as a badge of honor, in fact.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it took me
Hmm.
a long time.
Yeah.
That is
Well,
my badge of honor.
what's so interesting about what you're saying is that we often separate our personal life with our professional life. We have a personal persona and we have a professional persona. And what you're really
Mm,
doing with the work you're doing with your clients is you are saying, no, you actually have a persona, or you are who you are. And the key is to be a whole person no matter where you roam, right?
that's
That you're
right. Yes.
not putting on masks in one place and then another and another. Does that does that sound right?
Absolutely. Yes. And so then what it means is that when you're in your workplace, you can access, our natural feminine powers, which we don't value because they come so easy to us. So we don't recognize that when we walk into a meeting, for example, and we can sense where the tension is, okay, and we're therefore making judgments about what we say or who we speak to or how we might break the tension, we don't understand that that's a superpower. That there's a lot of people who can't do that. And as we step more into our own feminine powers, these are the things that we can bring. In the same way in which my client was able to kind of break the pattern and approach something differently and created a whole ripple effect, for things to be different. Does it mean she's never got a problem? No. Does it mean there's never a crisis that she has to step into? No. But it means she can handle it differently, and she knows she can handle it without having to take it all on. And so, this is the wisdom that we get to step into. And we don't appreciate, just kind of going back to our conversation earlier around like our menstrual cycle and now just our physiology, we don't appreciate how our bodies are built for creation and innovation, and that when we access these powers of whether they be intuition, or the deep knowing, or the connection and community that we are wired for in this individualized world, that we that's where we create magic. Not from being smarter or more intelligent. It's our ability to relate and connect, to other people. And one of the things that I love to talk to my clients about is how, as women, and particularly when we step into our feminine power, and this is not to say we shouldn't have some masculine power, we need to do stuff as well. There's no doubt about that. But when we embrace and balance it with our feminine power, we are magnetic. We are not designed, the feminine part of us is not designed to go out hustling. We're designed to, sit back and wait for things to come to us.
Yeah.
And so it's like when we change our energy, it's like, rather than it being a big black cloud around us, it's like we radiate outwards. People are naturally drawn to us and they start listening to us. Whereas before we felt so unheard, they suddenly start listening to us. They suddenly start seeking us out and looking for our advice. Or like my client I was talking about earlier, the young ones see us as someone who's got something valuable to offer. And so they start to seek counsel. And so, we literally change our outside world as we change our internal world.
That's how it
Yeah.
works, inside out. What you've perfectly
Yes.
described is effortless manifestation. A lot of us
Yes.
are trying to will the money in, or will the title in, or will in. And really, what it is if we are truly aligning with ourselves, it is automatically happening. It is almost effortlessly happening. And it is
Yeah.
such an incredible thing to experience when you feel so at peace and the stuff you want is happening, and you're not out
Yeah.
hustling and pounding the pavement and convincing people of your worth. And
Yes.
it's just, it's like magic. And this
Yes.
is actually the last thing. This has been so incredible. So much value here. The last thing I'd love for us to touch on is how we talk about ourselves and talk to ourselves. One of the things I hear again and again, because I work in the field of energy and I work in the
Yeah,
field of clairvoyant, intuitive downloading, and
yeah,
with my clients, we tap into these realms of the unseen. The veil is very thin, etc. Right? So when you experience that, you tend to want to minimize it because it can be a little unsettling and scaring. And so I hear a lot the words, it's weird, but, or it doesn't make sense, but I know it's strange, but so weird,
yeah,
strange, doesn't make sense. I feel crazy.
yeah, yeah,
These
yeah.
are these are things that I'm on a mission to get rid of in our vocabulary because this is the way women are not realizing it, but um, inviting in self-doubt and apologetic languaging.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And so, do you know, I always think that, we tend to value intellect over intuition, right? But it needs to be the other way around. We need some balance between the two. And I just imagine the day, right, when someone's around a boardroom table and they can say, look, the business case stacks up, the numbers make sense, but something doesn't feel right. And everyone says, okay, well, let's take a pause and we'll come back to it. I dream of that.
Right, me
I mean,
too.
wouldn't that be amazing, right? That would be so good to be able to do.
Yes.
And so, again, to me, once we do our own internal work and we're able to build our own sense of self-efficacy, when we trust ourselves, and we step into those feminine powers, the powers that make us women, we know how to handle all of that.
Yeah.
We know how to say to a room full of suits, that all stacks up, but there's something not quite right, in a way that makes sense to our audience, because that is our power. That is, like I say, that is our ability to be able to read a room and respond appropriately. So it's not about us all turning up to work, in our tie dye and our, with our tarot cards saying, let's start the meeting with this. It's not about that at all. It's about women being able to be the women that they want to be and not having to shy away from the feminine leadership qualities that we have. That is what actually makes us so powerful. And
Yes.
that, like I say, when we step into those, we provide the balance that's needed. And that's what we are being called to do.
Yes, beautiful. We have so much wisdom.
So much.
We're sewn together with wisdom. We're literally built
Yes.
for wisdom and it lives in our cells. It is in our intuition. And it's not that men don't have it. It's not that men aren't intuitive, but it is, like you say, such a natural state of being for us if we allow ourselves to get out of our head and into our heart space and really just be present and comfortable there.
Yeah.
We begin to understand how expansive and powerful we are. And your work is so valuable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing. It is encouraging. I'm just so excited about how you are melding the two worlds together so beautifully in the work that you do,
Thank you.
so that women can have a much easier time through this notoriously difficult time of life and maybe not make it so hard, right?
That's
Maybe not
right.
make
That's
it so
right.
hard.
And see the value of what comes after and feel the power of what they are actually, what we are here to do. We are midlife women for a reason. And let's not forget that it was the Dalai Lama, right, that said it's Western women that are going to save the world. So now's our time.
Here we are showing up.
Now's
So,
our
on that
time.
note, if somebody wants to learn more about what you do or how to find out more about your coaching around this
Yeah.
kind of thing, how can we find you?
Yeah, so my website is my name, so it's nice and easy, www.emmamason.com.au. Don't forget the AU because I'm in Australia. And I do work on LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my socials is on LinkedIn. And so I'm Emma Mason dash coach if you're looking for me on LinkedIn. And I'd absolutely love to connect with people in your audience. Um,
Great.
yeah, and that would be amazing. I do have a free download on my website for anyone who is finding themselves at a bit of a career crossroad. I've got the 5 questions that I ask my clients, plus a whole bunch of tips and information about why you might be at the crossroads and how to work your way through it. And so that's available for them to download for free if they're interested as well.
Wonderful. I will link all of that in the show notes so it's easy to access. And again, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for all of the insight that you've given us today. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. It's fantastic to be here.
Until next time.